Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you for joining me, Jag Singh, for another dose of Positive Minds on the SIKH channel. Positive Minds is a program on which I like to bring on informative and inspirational individuals who speak about, give us ideas on how we can improve our lives and those people around us. After the show, you can download my book, Unbreakable. Unbreakable is a story of my upbringing in East London during the 1970s. UK was a different place then. And it shows challenging factors that an 8-year-old goes through. And it also shows how I got from there to here. So that's Unbreakable, available on Amazon. Please download after this interview. Now, today, I'm going to talk about diversity and inclusion and to share this amazing insight on these amazing topics. I have Tony Burnett with me. Tony, thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem, Jag. Thanks for having me on.
Now, Tony is the CEO of an amazing organisation called Kick It Out. Okay, so Tony, for those people who don't know what Kick It Out is, please explain us more, please.
Yeah, sure. We're a anti-discrimination organisation. So we're 28 years old now. We've got our 30th anniversary in a couple of years' time, and we were founded to essentially tackle race discrimination within football. Since then, we've expanded, so we tackle race discrimination within football, but we also tackle all forms of discrimination. So, for example, this morning we've had a session about anti-Semitism, which has reared its ugly head again in a quite a big way within football recently. So, yeah, that's our history. We kind of tackle all forms of discrimination, and we do it through a number of vehicles. Really, I mean, our mission is to try and create a game where everyone belongs. And football should be for everyone. We want everybody to have a place in football, whether they choose to play, whether they choose to coach, or be a supporter. And I know obviously you grew up in the 70s, Jag, and I'm the same. And I remember in the 70s being from Bolton when there's not a prayer, I'd have gone to a Bolton Wanderers game and stood on the terraces because I knew what was coming. And that's the kind of stuff we're trying to tackle, making football a game where everyone belongs and everyone has a place, an equal place.
And Tony, about that, I grew, as you said, I grew up in the 80s when I was about 10 years old, about 11 years old. I grew up, you asked me earlier on what team did I support, and I said I grew up in Upton Park, so that gives it away a little bit. But what I found was that during the 80s, if you go back in time, 70s and that, there was no such organisation as Kick It Out. It didn't exist, right? And man, wasn't football a different world? It was like, I remember my mum, right, out of all the times in the world, she wanted a cucumber or a carrot from the shops when there was a match going on. Now, an Indian kid walking down the road, right, I was about 10, 11, I got bombarded with the fans throwing stuff at me, racist abuse and everything. And I just say to Mum, please, can we wait for the match to be over so I can, but no, obviously she had to make a curry then, it was bad timing. But the racism and the remarks I got for being an Indian boy walking down the road from these fans was terrible. And to know that now there's actually an organisation like yourself that is making sure that not only are you protecting the fans, you're protecting the players, you're protecting the people who work for football organisations. I mean, it's great.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I think we've moved on. I mean, we could spend probably all day talking about our mutual childhood experiences of racism. But I mean, within football, I think we started off as an organisation to eradicate discrimination. That's still a big part of what we do. We do a lot of the stuff we do now actually in that space is around lobbying. So we were a big part of the fan-led review. We input into that. And we're doing a lot of stuff now with the online harm safety bill, trying to make sure that the provisions within that online safety bill are appropriate. And we also kind of lobby the government around hate crime. And you'll have seen quite recently that there have been custodial sentences for people who were posting kind of aggressive and hateful stuff online. And we applaud that. We've been pushing for that for a few years now. So we want to make sure that keyboard warriors aren't safe in the bedrooms when they think it's okay to dash out racism. And a couple of prison sentences have actually seen a massive decrease in the number of racist incidents we're seeing online at the minute. But also, it's not just about punishment. So we're big on education as well. So inside the game, I mean, you'll be aware, Jag, the stuff that's gone on in cricket really recently. And I genuinely think that we've got a better environment in football. And that's not just down to Kick It Out. But, for the last 8 years, my colleague, Troy Townsend, who you know well, has been doing some fantastic work leading the education programs within football clubs. So we train all of the apprentices and scholars, the young kids that are coming through, so that when they get to professional level, and as we know, the vast majority won't. The vast majority will leave clubs and go into the wider world. But when they get to professional level, they understand what the behavioural norms are. They understand what the difference between banter and offensive language, and we don't have to have those levels of conversation with them. And then the third aspect that we work on, which we're passionate about, is talent. So we have a program called Raise Your Game. You're going to see that massively relaunched in March, and we're going on a massive push to try and get more people from different backgrounds into football. We want football to be a world where people can have careers from all backgrounds.
Do you know how happy it makes me feel to hear that, Tony? Right, that is some great stuff. Now, Tony, to become the CEO of Kick It Out, such an amazing organisation, only you know the road you have walked to get where you are today. Okay, the hard work you have done to get there. So, first of all, I'd like to applaud that. Okay, so well done. And secondly, let's go back in time now. Let's go to Bolton. Tell me about your education journey. Tell me about Bolton, Tony.
But Bolton's quite a tough working class town, to be fair, and that's no disrespect intended to people from Bolton. You know, it's my early journey was a difficult one. My dad's from Barbados. I'm a dual citizen, dual heritage. So my dad's Barbadian, and I've got a Barbadian passport as well, which I'm proud of. And my mum was white British. So we grew up in quite an undiverse area, shall we say. There was myself and another Jamaican kid who lived within a mile of me, and we met each other at 10 years old. He's still my best friend now. We kind of, I guess, battled everything together, from overt racism in the streets when we're playing out through to the challenges of school and education. And again, I grew up in a time, and there's no excuses here, Jag. You know, I didn't realise at the time how important it was to get an education and how liberating that could be in terms of the future life opportunities. My school life was just trying to survive, I'll be absolutely honest with you. And I didn't realise until later on, when I came out with very little in terms of qualifications, how important those years are. But I'm also passionate about, that's why I'm so passionate about social deprivation, because I think kids who grow up in poor areas and who are poor spend a lot of their life trying to survive. Education is a kind of, for a few, they'll come through the process. But when you're growing up in a poor neighbourhood and you're facing some of the challenges that poor kids are facing from all backgrounds, you know, to then succeed educationally is a huge challenge. So I kind of came out with, and I was concentrating on football as well, to be fair. So I came out with little in terms of qualifications. And then in my early 20s, I was lucky enough to get into sales and marketing, and I ended up at an organisation called Diageo, which is a big drinks organisation. But to get there, I kind of, probably 5 years before that, I knew that to get into an organisation like that, I had to get a degree. So with a young family, I went to night school, I got my degree. And then I went to Liverpool University part-time, got my master's degree. And then I reapplied to Diageo 5 years later, and they rejected me 5 years previously because I didn't have a degree. And then I got in. And it really kind of, my career took off from there, all because of a piece of paper that says I'm intelligent.
And Tony, do you know, that's to the viewers out there, right? Those guys who think they've missed the bus, you know, that you can't get on the ladder of education, and you know you got a bit of white hair growing on your head. You know, Tony's an example here, and the same thing with me, Tony. I went to school, and you know, there's so much racism going around me. I didn't have time to educate. I wasn't focused on education, just like we explained there. But you know what I did, Tony? I did exactly what you did. After many years, I went back and I did the night schools, and you know, I did the education because I thought to myself that there is time, we can manage our time, you know, and it's also a matter of passion, of how badly, you know, you wanted it, and you wanted it badly, Tony, and there you are right now, leading the way with Kick It Out, and that's a great story, Tony. Amongst the great work you've done, Tony, I also understand that you worked with West Midlands Police as an assistant director of diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
That must have been an interesting role.
It was fascinating, actually. Yeah, it was my first probably introduction to the Sikh community in a large degree. I moved to Birmingham. I'd been living in Hull, so prior to joining West Mids Police, my career is kind of, I started off in commercial broad business with Diageo, and then I've kind of interchanged between commercial leadership and diversity and inclusion. So prior to joining West Mids Police, I was managing director of a food manufacturing company up in Hull for 3 years. And then I joined West Midlands Police, and I love Birmingham. I mean, I just had such a passion for Birmingham and the diversity of the community. It was my first introduction to Visaki, and I loved it. You know, tens of thousands of people on the streets of Birmingham. It was a fantastic experience. And I got involved with our Sikh Police Association quite heavily. Harvey Rai, you know, a good colleague and friend at the time as well. And some of the key principles of the Sikh faith are what I live my life by. Every human being's of equal value. That's what I do. That's why I do what I do. Irrespective of background, every human being is of equal value. But the policing experience taught me something else as well, Jaggy, in terms of, and again, I don't want to be disparaging to policing, but we've got a role, we've got a really important next few years, I think, within policing, because in this country, police with the consent of the public. Now, to do that, for me, they have to have legitimacy. To have legitimacy, they have to understand the communities they're working with. And the only way that they can do that is by representing, and I mean physically, having the right number of people to understand, from the different backgrounds, to understand the communities they're working with. And all the nonsense over many years about, all we've got to do is train colleagues, etc. It's impossible. You know as well as I do, Jag. It's not about training. This is about lived experience. This is about having somebody in the organisation that understands the concept and the context of the different communities in our society. And so I'm a huge advocate of, and Harvey, I'm sure, would agree, and lots of good other people in West Mids Police, I'm a huge advocate of the police has to be representative of the communities that we serve. And then just one kind of small example of that is around the often quoted stats around stop and search. And other areas. The stop and search is obviously a kind of controversial area. I'm convinced, because I've seen the evidence. The bottom line is, when you're recruiting white male, just an example, white male police officers, for example, from often from kind of, what's the best way of describing it? Quite privileged backgrounds. I'm not saying all are, but some are from quite privileged backgrounds. They grow up in communities where they never come into contact with people like you and I. And then they're put on the streets in places like Birmingham, where they're coming into contact with people like you and I all the time. And I'll be honest with you, the number of officers I've seen who aren't necessarily racist, but they're frightened because they don't understand us and they don't understand the community that they're interacting with. And so I think it's massively important that we get over this barrier, and we're really clear about the fact that the police have to represent the communities that they serve in terms of physical representation. And I also have to say, and this isn't because I'm on here, Jag, the number of fantastic officers I've met from a Sikh background, more than any other actually, is incredible. So it was a privilege and an honour to work with them.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. And Tony, I've had a few conversations with you, and I've realised, right, it's not just occupational hazard with you. You have a natural talent to get your team to know other cultures, other creeds, mix with people, know about religions. And that's what I find so fascinating, and that you're in that position, that you're not just in a bubble. And what you said there, you're so right. I've done, right, Tony, I've done some ethnic and diversity seminars on Zoom with a few major companies, and I've had about 30 people on the screen, just listen to what I'm saying. And you're 100% right, Tony. About 50% of them didn't even know racism existed. And that's because of the background, as you said, the background you've grown up with, and having those kind of people working for the police force, etc., with lack of education, it's amazing, and it's good that you're saying that that's happening now. Because yes, in the 70s and 80s, that the police didn't know about our culture. They didn't know why my dad wore a turban. As far as a couple of them thought, it was a little giggle, But today, things are changing, and education about religions, and as you're saying, there's many Sikh officers and guys who are up there, and they are doing a good work, and they're not only in the Sikh culture, many other cultures as well.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I like about you, Tony, the fact that you're spreading, it's education. It's about why does that culture do that? And I remember my granddad used to be amazing Jewish friends he used to work, because he's in the rag trade. And he had hairstyles, my dad wore the turban, and the Jews had the hair coming down. And I used to ask my granddad, I said, well, Dad, Granddad, why do they have this? And I had that education from such a young childhood, but not many people had that experience. So it's good that you're doing the education part of it.
Well, and also you get a key word there, Jag, which is teamwork. I don't assume for a second that I know everything about all backgrounds, because I don't. It's not. I've got my lived experience, but what I do try and do all the time, actually, and I encourage people, whoever I work with in policing or elsewhere, is if you don't know the answer, then don't try and answer the question. Find people who do know the answer. And I think that's something that not just policing. I think lots of organisations are guilty of making assumptions about what they think different communities need without asking the communities, and I'm massively against that. If you want to do something in the right way, consult the right people.
Yeah, 100%. Tony, And your career, your landed up your climb doesn't just stop there, does it? You've also supported Lloyd's, Ford's Motor Company as well, spreading a good message.
Yeah, well, Ford was my first job in diversity actually in 2000, and it was just after. I don't know if you remember this, Jag. You probably, I think we're similar ages, but I went to Ford on the back of there was a huge issue with race discrimination at Ford in Dagenham in particular, and this was just after Ford had put out a recruitment ad, and it went out in the UK with a Sikh guy on the recruitment ad. Then it went to Europe. When it came back to the UK, the Sikh guy had been airbrushed out of the ad. So Ford was accused of being racist, and they had no defence to this. I mean, when you look at it, it turned out that the advertising agency had made a few bad decisions, and but what it came down to again was that nobody who looked like us was involved in any of those decisions, and so people
Yeah,
were making
yeah,
bizarre decisions about what they thought people would want to see when it comes to recruitment. The unintended consequence was that obviously, lots of people within Asian communities thought them Ford was racist. And to be fair, when you started looking internally, and I worked for a fantastic guy in Ford at the time, a chap called Surinder Sharma, again, who's now still a good friend and been a mentor for many years. When you looked beneath the surface, there was a huge amount of racism going on, and so it was my early kind of baptism, I suppose, into diversity and inclusion issues was, and I mean when I say racism going on, I mean I'm talking physical abuse. People were beaten up so that they couldn't apply for certain jobs. Overt abuse was just common. We used to have situations where dog mess was put in lockers to of ethnic minority colleagues. It was that serious in some parts of Ford at the time. But we got a plan together, led by Surinder, and we made some change. But that was a baptism of fire for me. The Ford Motor Company experience. I also worked in Belgium and Spain and France and Germany as well with Ford. So again, an interesting experience in first international experience as well.
and what you
And then
said. Yeah, sorry, go on. Tony.
sorry, Jack, go on. No, go on.
No, I wasn't so Tony. When you what you just said there about what was happening at Dagenham, I can relate to that because my dad he
Yeah,
was he was working during that time, and he used to come home, and sometimes Tony used to come home and just put his hands on his head and head down, and I could tell what he was going through, and he just put the brave smile on. But I can't imagine. I mean, I can't, in the 70s, what he went through. But the good point, the positive side of it is that what you did there, you was building a force, you was building a change. It was like the amazing turning point that was taking place. That we're not going to accept this. There's got to be change, and that's why I believe we're all here anyway, Tony. To get
yeah,
along, get to understand each other. And if you don't understand someone, or if racism is never going to die. Okay, Tony, it's never going to go away. Yeah, but all I say is that those people keep them thoughts to themselves. And also try and no one's born a racist. No
yeah,
one's born. No one comes into this planet thinking we're racist. It comes from somewhere. It comes from
absolutely.
parents. It comes from people around you, associates. And we just need to live and let live now. And I'm glad that that turning point took place at Dagenham.
Yeah, I'm with you completely, Jag. I think, yeah, completely. And Ford's a different place now. I'm sure they've still got issues, but I know for a fact the issues won't be anything like as serious as they were then. But the other side of that coin is I just encourage, because I've been in this area for so long across so many countries. You've got to the fundamentals are always important. Where you've got discrimination going on, it's impossible to talk about some of the more positive aspects of diversity. So I always start with it when in an organisation, the baseline. Where are the kind of key crunch points? Have we eradicated some of the base issues that are going on? Do people know how to talk to each other in a respectful way? Do line managers behave in a respectful way to colleagues? Do colleagues treat each other with respect? And once you've got that in place, as to your point, we're all treating each other as human beings. A lot of the other stuff is pretty straightforward, but that's the baseline. In everywhere I go, people are equal. People are human beings. How do they want to be treated? And are we treating them in the way they want to be treated?
Tony, what's your drive, man? I mean, you're on fire. Okay, you're doing the change. You've got a great team around you, man. What's your passion? What keeps you going, Tony?
Jack, I've been lucky enough actually the last few years. I had a consulting business for 8 years as well, in between Lloyd's and another role. And I'm lucky enough to work all over the world in places like South Africa and Namibia, Nigeria, Kenya. My passion is I do passionately believe every human being is of equal value, and I will. That's a principle I'll kind of take to my grave, irrespective of background, irrespective of physical ability, whatever. Every human being is of equal value, and that's what gets me out of bed in the morning to try and make sure whatever industry or organisation I'm working in, that they are living that value and they're treating everyone as an individual of equal value.
Amazing. Now, Tony, also understand that you also gained some experience as a semi-professional footballer. You kicked the ball about and you're good at it. Tell me about that.
Well, that's for others to decide whether I was any good, Jack. But yeah, I did. Well, we had a conversation about school background. I was a trialist. I had trials at Man City, Bournemouth, Bolton Wanderers, and in 17 I ended up at Huddersfield Town, and I was a long-term trialist there. So I had the fantastic opportunity of playing at Anfield. So we played Liverpool in the first round of the FA Youth Cup and beat them at Anfield. In the presence of Sir Kenny, which was lovely. And we lost against Sheffield Wednesday in the second round. And after that game, I was released. Yeah, I was released. And it was in the days when...
and also you did some coaching as well?
I did, yeah. So, I semi-pro-wise, I played for Ashton United, Salford City at the time. And when I retired from football, I did my coaching qualifications, and coached kids teams. I retired from that about 5 years ago, but I've got a UEFA B coaching license as well. So we coach kids. Myself and one of my ex-teammates actually, who ended up playing for Manchester City, a lad called Paul Moulding. We coached kids teams for about 10 or 12 years together.
Brilliant. Great career, Tony. Great career. Now, let's talk about your views on racism, Tony. I mean, we all know it exists in sports, right? It's not only in football, like you said earlier. Okay, it's in all forms. The cricket situation has happened recently. Will it ever end, Tony? Will there ever be a time where we're actually going to go into someone's going to actually go to sports, into football or whatever, and it ain't going to be no racism? I know you're trying to tighten it up, but do you think we can ever live in a time when it's going to be eradicated?
Do you know what, Jag? I hope so. You mentioned this earlier, actually. No one's born a racist. So I think the first thing we've got to work out is how do people become racist? Or how do they develop views that are racist? And I think this is where football and whatever sport we're talking about, whatever organisation can only do so much. And when I look at the difference between, for example, the way South Africa tackle this problem and the way that the UK tackle this problem, it's a vast chasm. So I think the problem we've got in the UK is that there is a government denial around structural and institutional racism. And I think what that prevents is it prevents us having a conversation about the historical legacy of slavery and colonialism. You know, you and I are products of colonialism. And we never have that conversation. I certainly never had it in school. I know my kids have gone through school. My kids are grown up now. They never had that conversation about what colonialism was, what it meant. And in fact, the notion that for colonialism to exist, it had to convince people like you and I that we were inferior to the white master, which is, you know, the British master at the time. Now, those are the conversations for me that need to happen. And that's the discussion that needs to happen if we're going to deconstruct racism, because all we're seeing now, actually, for me, is the remnants of that, which is people, even in football grounds, that think it's okay to shout racist comments. They do that because they think people like you and I are inferior to them. And that's the bit we need to deconstruct. We need to understand why it is that people believe that Black and Asian people are inferior to them, and we've got to get rid of it. But we only get rid of it by acknowledging its existence and acknowledging the fact that it's being perpetrated throughout our education system. I mean, again, without getting, I'm quite passionate about this topic, Jag, but history is a great example. You know, the number of people from Sikh backgrounds who fought for this country in World Wars I and II is a fantastic example. Why is that history so hidden? Why are our children not told about that in schools and educated properly about the role of the Sikh community in building this country? And that's just one small example of history that has been whitewashed for me, and it needs to be addressed. And I think if we can get to an honest dialogue, which I don't think we're going to do under this government at the minute, because they're in such denial about the issues and what underpins the issues, all we're doing is scratching away at the surface. But that's where we need to get to, honest dialogue about real history and about what colonialism has done when it comes to creating racism.
Tony, listen, it's been great having you on the show today, Tony. We could go on talking forever, but I'll tell you one thing, Tony, I feel so comfortable and so happy that there is an organisation out there like yourself who's actually making, you know, moving up there, going up the mountain, you know, saying, no, we are going to make a difference on this planet, you know. So, Tony, thank you so much for joining us today on Positive Minds. And I'm going to get you back on, Tony. I'm going to get you back on here soon, all right?
Thanks
Thank
for
you
having me.
very
It's
much,
been a
Tony,
pleasure.
for coming on
Thank you.
today.
Thanks, Joe.
So there you have it, guys. No problem. Thank you, Tony. So there you have it. Everybody should have the right, despite their colour, creed, religion, to play any sport they want without feeling any abuse. And because of Kick It Out, organisations like Kick It Out, Tony Burnett here today, the CEO, has explained that that difference is happening. We are making that change. So let's get together and all just get along, like I said before. Listen, guys, thank you for joining me, Jag Singh, on Positive Minds. Please keep smiling and keep moving forward. वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा वाहिगुरु जी की फतेह।